on the left, and then some pictures of my CareSIF family on the right. So what is long-term care? Well, it really varies depending on who you ask. But according to the National Institute on Aging, long-term care involves a variety of services designated to meet a person's health or personal care needs during a short or long period of time. These services help people live as independently and as safely as possible when they can no longer perform their everyday activities. So in this bigger picture of long-term care, it involves care in the home setting and the professional setting, and it also involves care from paid and unpaid sources of support. So care from friends and family is considered long-term care. Now, I wanted to talk about our activities of daily living because I'll be talking about these throughout our presentation today. But if you've ever heard a healthcare worker or a doctor refer to your ADLs, they're talking about your activities of daily living. And the most common form of long-term care is help with these daily activities. So these are things like bathing, changing, walking, eating, transferring, which is getting in and out of bed or getting in and out of your wheelchair, and toileting. So this is the first big section of our presentation, all of the different care options available when you want to keep your loved ones home as long as possible. I want you to walk away from this presentation today knowing what type of supplemental care you can get if your loved ones need care at home. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is home health services. A lot of people start with home health, and I'll explain why. We're going to talk about home care agencies and the difference between home health and home care. We'll be discussing home and community-based services. Jackie mentioned that earlier today. We'll be talking about adult day care and adult day health care and the differences between the two. And I'm also going to go over respite care for you. And I want you to know not only what are these different types of care options, but I want you to know when you would call upon these different types of care. So I'm going to give you an example of when to use these different types of care using my grandparents, June and Ichiro Tanaka. They're no longer with us today, but I like to honor them by including them in my presentations and talking about them. And so I'm going to be poking fun at them all day because they're going to be my examples for these different types of care. So I'm sure they're going to have a good laugh about my presentation today. Okay, so first is home health services. Home health services needs to be ordered usually by your physician for a specific condition. This service is time limited and intended for homebound patients. Now, what does it mean to be homebound? It means that it's taxing for you to leave the house, and you're only leaving for necessity and medical appointments. If you're leaving to go walking at the mall every morning, you probably don't qualify for home health services. Home health includes things like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, a registered nurse. And I want to give you an example of when you would call home health. So let's say June and Ichiro are living at home, they're doing fine, but Ichiro starts to have multiple falls and he's in and out of the hospital. And he's at home now and he cannot get out of the house. June can't get him out of the house. What is she gonna do? She contacts Ichiro's primary care physician and she explains what's happening. He can't walk anymore. Ichiro's doctor says not to worry, I'm going to order home health services for you. Now, is home health a covered benefit or not? Yes, it absolutely can be. Medicare covers home health services. So Ichiro's doctor is going to order home health for him, and physical therapy and occupational therapy will come to his house to exercise him and get him stronger. That's a prime example of when someone would contact home health services. And notice that June isn't contacting the home health provider herself, asking them to start services. They have to go through their physician because they need a doctor's order for that. So this is our first type of care, and a lot of people start here because Medicare covers home health. The second thing I want to talk about is home care, because a lot of people get home health and home care confused, but they're very different. Home care is non-medical care provided in a home setting. You do not need a physician's order for home care. You can call them directly, and these agencies are required to be licensed by the Department of Health, so they're under the Office of Healthcare Assurance. And these services, on the Department of Health website, they list 3 major services for home care. So if you're calling a home care agency, you'll now have an idea of what type of care you're going to be requesting. So personal care is help with activities of daily living, that slide that we talked about, bathing, dressing, changing, toileting, things like that. Homemaker assistance is a lighter form of care. So that's meal planning, meal preparation, light housekeeping, and chore services. And the third service listed on the Department of Health website is respite care. And we see people requesting respite care when their primary caregivers need relief, or if they need temporary care and they have a lack of caregivers. Now, there's a fourth type of care. It's not listed on the Department of Health website, but I see families request this pretty often. It's called companion care. And that's when you have someone come out, sit with you, and socialize with you, keep you company. Is this a covered benefit or not? Unfortunately, Medicare doesn't cover home care, right? But it does cover home health. So a lot of people are privately paying for home care. But if you contact the Aging and Disability Resource Center, it could be a covered benefit for you, but you have to, there may be some requirements that you have to meet, and sometimes there's a wait list. If you have long-term care insurance, this could be a covered benefit under your long-term care provider, but you have to check with your provider. And a prime example of when June and Ichiro would need home care. Let's say Ichiro completes his home health. He's not having falls anymore. He's walking with a front wheel walker, but June is really fearful of bathing him. She doesn't want him to fall down getting in and out of the bathtub. She doesn't want to fall down helping him. He's much bigger than she is. June contacts a home care agency directly herself to inquire about their hourly rate. And they start services same day. They come out every day starting today, and they provide 4 hours of care on a daily basis. And this can be short-term or long-term, but that's a common reason why I see people starting home care. Home and community-based services. Now, according to the Department of Human Services, home and community-based services are meant to reduce reliance on institutional care and enable people with disabilities to participate fully in their communities and create a more balanced long-term care system. So for further information on home and community-based services, you can look to the Aging and Disability Resource Center. You can look to the Hawaii MedQuest Division. I hope I didn't give anything away there. And the services that are under these programs are very vast. There's lots of services, so I'm just going to name a few. Transport services, meal services, adult daycare programs, case management services. They also have respite programs. There's many, many more. Now, is this a covered benefit? A lot of these services are free. Some are heavily subsidized. If you have Medicaid, you might be eligible under Medicaid, so you have to contact your Medicaid provider to see if you meet that requirement. An example of when June and Ichiro would use these home and community-based services, let's say they're living in their house and June is still taking care of Ichiro, helping him with some of his activities of daily living, but let's say she wants to stop driving, okay? Ichiro's not driving, June doesn't want to drive anymore, so she's worried. How am I going to get to the grocery store, right? What am I going to cook? How am I going to get us to medical appointments? So she contacts the Aging and Disability Resource Center, and they link her up with services like Handy Van, Meals on Wheels. They may hook her up with a bathing service. And there may be a wait list for some of these services, but there might not be. But this is a prime example of when someone would depend on these home and community-based services as supplemental care to keep your loved ones at home longer. I'm going to be defining adult daycare and adult day health, and then I'm going to give you an example of when you would be transitioning from these different types of care, because it is a continuum of care. So adult daycare facilities or adult daycare centers are facilities that provide a safe professional setting for older adults that may benefit from activities, socialization, and routine. And these day centers are important because they provide respite to family caregivers who need supervision for loved ones during the day so they can work, run errands, or have personal time. These adult daycare centers, the services vary from program to program, but a lot of them include things like meals, a healthy balance of physical and mental exercises, entertainment, routine, opportunities for socialization. Some offer bathing, some do not. And is this a covered benefit? A lot of people are privately paying for adult daycare centers, but you could contact the Aging and Disability Resource Center to see if you qualify through their programs. I'm going to give you an example at the end. Adult day health is a little different, right? It has that health component. So according to Department of Health, these facilities, adult day health programs, are organized day programs of therapeutic, social, and health services provided to adults with physical or mental impairments or both, which require nursing oversight or care for the purpose of restoring or maintaining to the fullest extent possible their capacity for remaining in the community. So services that are provided in adult day health centers are very similar to services provided in adult day care centers. But in addition to the services provided in adult day care, they also offer therapeutic and health services and can provide nursing oversight. So they're required by Department of Health to staff differently. Is this a covered benefit? Most people, or a lot of people, are privately paying for adult day health, but it could be a covered benefit for you if you contact the Aging and Disability Resource Center and you meet certain requirements. An example of when a family would use these day programs, let's say June and Ichiro are at home, and June notices that Ichiro is watching TV every day, 7 days a week, and she just wants him to socialize and to have more stimulation and routine. And he doesn't need a lot of care, but she wants to improve his quality of life. She may enroll him in an adult day care center near her during normal business hours, sometimes on weekends. But if Ichiro is in the adult daycare program, could be for years, thriving and doing well, if he starts to decline and he needs nursing oversight and care, the adult daycare program may approach June and say it's time for Ichiro to transition to an adult day health care program. That's when we see people move from adult daycare to adult day health. And respite care is last on our list for care options available at home. According to the National Institute on Aging, respite care provides short-term relief for primary caregivers. We also see individuals needing respite care when they need temporary care and they have a lack of caregivers. A lot of the different programs we're talking about today provide respite care. So in-home caregiver agencies, right, home care, they provide respite. All the facilities we'll be talking about today, senior communities, licensed care homes, skilled nursing facilities, they can also provide respite care. And the price varies depending on the type of care that you're looking into. Is this a covered benefit or not? So there is a program under Medicare where they will pay for 5 days in a skilled nursing facility under hospice, but you have to be signed on with hospice to benefit from that Medicare respite program. And to find out if you're eligible, you would contact the hospice provider that you're currently working with. If you have Medicaid, you could be eligible for respite care through Medicaid, but you have to contact your Medicaid provider. And if you have long-term care insurance, it's possible you have to contact your long-term care insurance provider. Now, an example of when someone would need respite care, let's say June and Ichiro's daughter is getting married in Las Vegas, and Ichiro is not fit to fly, but June really wants to be there for the wedding. That's a lot of times when we see people getting respite care. So June would be looking for a 2-week respite, either with in-home caregivers coming in 24/7 or in a facility. Some of the facilities have a 2-week minimum for respite care, but some will do respite in as short as a day. So you just have to contact the different providers to find out more information about what their requirements are. Okay, so that was, we only have 30 minutes, so I'm just doing a quick overview of these different long-term care options, and that's all the supplemental care that's available in the home. I'm briefly going to go over what are our care options outside the home when our loved ones need more care than what we can provide, right? When they need professional support. So I'm going to go over assisted living communities, and for this purpose of this presentation, we're going to be talking about independent living, assisted living, and memory care. Some of these senior communities have skilled nursing. Some of them have extended care, but these are the main services that they provide. We're also going to talk about licensed care homes in Hawaii. We generally have adult residential care homes and community care foster family homes. And lastly, I'll be talking about skilled nursing facilities. There's a lot of confusion in the community about whether a skilled nursing facility is covered for me or not covered. And that's because there's two specific types of care you can go into at the skilled nursing facility, and that's short-term rehab and long-term care. So we'll be discussing the two briefly today. So senior communities. Assisted living communities are a form of long-term care that provide a combination of senior housing, personal care, chore services, and meal services. They're known for their activities, socialization, amenities, and restaurant-style meals, all geared towards improving quality of life. So some of these communities, they feel like luxury living, like luxury condos. They have all kinds of amenities, everything you can think of. Some have a gym, a fitness center, a hot tub, a pool, a library, music room, beauty parlor, all kinds of wonderful things at these places. And the services included are things like transportation, meals, personal care, which is help with activities of daily living, and housekeeping. Now, is this a covered benefit? Unfortunately, Medicare does not cover assisted living communities, but if you have long-term care insurance, it could be a covered benefit under your long-term care provider. And an example of when June and Ichiro would need assisted living, let's say Ichiro doesn't need that much help, just some help with his activities of living, but they're tired of maintaining their house, right? They're tired of picking weeds in the yard and hiring people to mow the lawn and fix things when it's broken. So June and Ichiro might research a shared room in a senior community where they can benefit from all the amenities, and June also could have respite. She could have help from the staff to help care for her husband and help him with his activities of daily living. And that's when we see a lot of couples transition to assisted living communities, right? They really focus on improving your quality of life in these communities. So I'm breaking down our care into two big sections. The first slide is I'm going over adult residential care homes or ARCHs. In the next slide, I'll be briefly talking about community care foster families. So these adult residential care homes are non-institutional settings that provide supervision for those that are unable to care for themselves. And Department of Health categorizes these into two groups. The first are ARCH Type 1, and that just means 5 residents or less. These are smaller care homes. We typically see 5 resident care homes in Hawaii. The second type of category for these care homes are ARCH Type 2. That means 6 or more residents. So it refers to the size of the care home. There's also something in these care homes called expanded care, and they provide a higher level of care. Now, these care homes, the services vary from care home to care home, but generally they provide things like supervision and care, transportation and outings, meals and chore services, daily exercise and stimulation. Now, is this a covered benefit? Unfortunately, Medicare does not cover adult residential care homes. But if you have long-term care insurance, it could be a covered benefit for a long-term care provider. And an example of when June and Ichiro would need an adult residential care home, let's say Ichiro now needs help with his activities of daily living. Maybe he's becoming socially withdrawn and he's looking for a smaller setting. He doesn't want to be around a lot of residents. So Ichiro requests to move to an adult residential care home. That's when we see people look into these care homes. Okay. And next are the Community Care Foster Family Homes, or CCFFH. These foster family homes help individuals needing a higher level of care to remain in a home setting as part of a family. They help provide affordable care and limit institutionalization. So in the adult residential care homes, we typically see 5 residents in the home. In the community care foster family home, they have 2 to 3 residents. So they have less residents in the home. And services provided are very similar to services in the adult residential care home. They provide supervision and care, meals and transportation, and outings and chore services. Now, the community care foster family homes are meant to support the Medicaid population. So Medicare does not cover community care foster family homes, but if you have Medicaid, it could be a covered benefit for you. You might have to financially qualify and meet their level of care qualifications, but it could be a covered benefit under Medicaid. An example of when June and Ichiro would need a community care foster family home. Let's say that Ichiro now needs nursing oversight. He needs heavy care. He's been steadily declining and he spent down his assets. So he's running out of money and he needs to apply for long-term care Medicaid. June is now going to start researching these community care foster family homes for him. And last on our list is the skilled nursing facilities. These are bigger institutional settings that provide trained medical staff available around the clock to assist with healthcare needs. And there's confusion about whether this is covered or not because there's 2 major different types of services that you can go to these nursing facilities for. The first is short-term rehab and the second is long-term care. So for short-term rehab, the intent is that you're going there to improve, get better, and go home. So you're receiving skilled care at short-term rehab. This is things like physical therapy, occupational therapy, IV therapy. Now, short-term rehab is a covered benefit under Medicare. Medicare will pay for up to 100 days of short-term rehab as long as you meet their requirements. Long-term care is a little different. In long-term care, you're still in the nursing facility, but you're not receiving skilled care. You're there for the nursing care and the room and board. And so while Medicare covers short-term rehab in these nursing facilities, it does not cover long-term care in these nursing facilities. But if you have Medicaid, you could be eligible for long-term care in a nursing facility through Medicaid. And if you have long-term care insurance, this could also be a covered benefit for you through your long-term care provider. So is it a covered benefit? Yes and no, depending on the type of service you're going into the nursing facility for. And to give you an example of the transition of care, I'm going to use my grandparents again. I've picked on Ichiro this entire presentation, so I'm going to use June as an example now. Let's say June has been thriving in the assisted living community, but she has a major fall and she breaks something. She breaks her leg. She goes to the hospital, the physical therapist evaluates her, and they recommend short-term rehab. So she's transferred to one of these skilled nursing facilities for rehab, where she will receive physical therapy and occupational therapy, and Medicare will cover her stay. Now, let's say if in rehab she's not improving, she starts rapidly declining, and we find some significant medical illness in June where she can no longer participate with therapy. At that point, the nursing facility would stop short-term rehab. Medicare would no longer be covering her stay, but they may opt to keep her there for long-term care. So the family may be now privately paying for long-term care, or if she has Medicaid, Medicaid might cover her long-term care stay at the nursing facility, but the nurses will manage and take care of her care on a regular basis. And at that time, the nursing facility might recommend hospice to care for her. So, this is a very sad scenario, but I think the important takeaway is that, a lot of families do go through this, and no matter what your level of care is, no matter what your needs are, we're very fortunate in Hawaii to have these different specialized services to provide the support to our loved ones when we need it. So the main takeaway is that there is care available no matter what type of care you need. So I just want to thank everyone. That was a lot of information to cover in 30 minutes. As a caregiver myself, I know how precious your time is, And it's an honor to be here, and thank you to AARP for throwing this amazing event. Aloha.
Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Nicole? We have time for a couple of questions. Raise your hand. Going.
Yes.
Oh, hold on. I should also mention that MedQuest has a table in the lobby, and it's very rare for them to be here. So if you need to talk to them, don't miss that opportunity.
Is Medicaid under this too?
Medicaid is one of the different types of insurance that cover these benefits. Thank you. Yes.
Hold on. Can we do?
Okay. Sorry. You're next. Thanks.
Hi, with assisted living, is there a time when someone cannot no longer stay there, maybe because of ADLs? And will the assisted living help you look for a long-term care, or do they just give you 2 weeks to go somewhere at 85 or whatever?
Thank you. That's a good question. So for the assisted living communities, they don't provide nursing care unless there's a skilled nursing floor in them. And so sometimes there is a time where you do have to transition out of those assisted living communities. And they do help provide support to help you safely transition out of the senior community so that you have a safe disposition and a safe discharge plan. If you're having multiple falls and you're not safe in your apartment, that's one reason. If you need nursing care and oversight, if they don't have a nursing floor, that's another reason somebody might need to transition out of that senior community. But some of them do have services where you can age in place in the senior community so you don't have to move. I know everyone wants to age in place now. Thank you.
Some of these transitions are kind of difficult for families to talk about even. And I'm wondering, like, you see your mother not leaving the house, she's not socializing. You want to try the daycare for her. How do you talk to your mother, or can you get help in some of these transitions?
That's a really great question. And I see families struggle with this on a daily basis. And I think it's important to know that sometimes when you sit down with your loved one, if they're real resistant and you're trying to convince them to start care, it's hard to convince them on the unknown, because sometimes maybe you're talking to them about an adult daycare program, but they have no idea what the adult daycare program is like, and they're imagining the worst. So I think sometimes it helps to do some research ahead of time, and then when you talk to your loved one, say, I have an example in mind, can we just take a look at this? So it's a real example that they can visit, they can go and sit with. They might surprise you. Sometimes they make friends. Sometimes when you leave, they ask, when can we go back? Those are the best situations, but there are times where they are resistant, and it's just a matter of, are they safe or not?
I just want to mention, we have a booklet out on our table called Prepare to Care, which kind of walks you through how to have the family conversation. But if you cannot, the Mediation Center of the Pacific actually has mediation services that can help you have that conversation.
Thank you.
Hi. Do they have like consult for psychiatric care? Not for like Alzheimer's, but other psychiatric issues at these adult centers?
Thank you. So in Hawaii, we have geriatric psychiatrists that can help, but they're not on consult for a lot of these places like the senior communities and the care homes. If you're in a skilled nursing facility, they could come to the skilled nursing facility on consult, but if you're in a senior community or a care home, you would have to visit them in office like a personal private physician. Good question. Thank you.
Oh, hi. I'd just like to say I've been talking to Frida on your staff, so she's very good. So kudos to her. So pass along my compliments. Anyway, my question for you is my mom has a long-term care policy, but she has a 90-day waiting period. In terms of the long-term care, world, a day equals what, 4 or more hours, or does it have to be a full 8 hours?
That's a great question. And all the long-term care insurance plans are different and their stipulations are different. But from my understanding, and I could be wrong, if you're looking at home care, right, then it's going by an hourly rate. But if you're looking at a daycare program or a facility, then it might be the full day and not the hourly rate.
The carrier then.
Yes, that
Okay.
depends on the carrier and
Yeah.
the type of care.
Because
Yep.
my mom is with Transamerica, so I know maybe different insurance companies have different terminology or whatever. So, okay, thank you.
They do, and it changes every year. So that's why it's so complicated. Thank you.
Nicole, while I'm walking to the back, can you just talk a little bit about what case managers do?
Oh, okay. So from my understanding, case managers oversee your care and your plan of care. So if you're going into a community care foster family home or an adult residential care home at the expanded level of care, it's required by law to have a case manager on board overseeing your loved one's care in the facility. If you're in a skilled nursing facility, you would not need a case manager because my understanding is that you're under the care of a physician.
What would be the best way to locate respite providers?
Oh, that's a great question. First, you want to narrow down the type of care that you want because each type of care has a different price range. And so first you want to narrow down whether you're looking at in-home care versus placement. And then I would ask them right off the bat if they do respite care or not, because some of the providers do not do respite care at all. So sometimes it takes some calling.
There's not a list available of who would provide this?
No, there isn't a list because that changes on a regular basis. If you call a licensed care home and they have 3 openings, they're going to take in a respite clients. But if they're full and they only have 1 opening, they might not take a respite this year, but next year or next month, their ability to take a respite changes on a regular basis. Same with the home care. If the home care has ample supply of caregivers at that given moment in time when you call them, they will take a respite. But if they're full, sometimes they will decline respite.
But we are going to talk in a few minutes about the Aging Disability Resource Center run by the county, and they also offer some respite care.
Yes, yes. The Aging and Disability Resource Center is a great resource for respite care, for case management, for all these different services that we talked about today.
We'll do 2 more questions.
Okay.
Good morning.
Hi.
You mentioned earlier about case workers being assigned to a certain situation. Can you expand where or who is the case worker and how do you obtain that service?
Okay. So if you go to the Department of Health's website under the Office of Healthcare Assurance, you can see a full list of licensed case management agencies, and those are the case managers that oversee the community care foster family homes. And I believe that there might be they might define case management on the Office of Healthcare Assurance website. I could be wrong, but in order to get into that type of facility, you have to have a case manager on board. They would do the admission and all the paperwork for you.
And are there case managers outside of the facilities that people can just hire if they want someone to manage their care?
That's a great question. Not for the community care foster family homes. You have to be a licensed case management agency under Office of Healthcare Assurance for the community care foster family homes, but for the adult residential care homes and expanded care, you can use an unlicensed case manager, but there is no list that I know of that where we can go to for those.
Okay, we have time for 1 more question. Oh, of course, it's in the very back. That's okay. I need the steps. I need the steps.
Hi, thank you for coordinating this wonderful seminar for us. I'm a caregiver, that's why I'm here, but my mother is also a peritoneal dialysis patient, so I connect her in a machine every night. And my concern is if something happens to me, I've had the hardest time finding support, trained folks who can do this. And when I talked to the dialysis center, they said they have a hard enough time finding qualified people for their centers. So how do I go about doing that? This happened because my mom she fails at multiple surgeries, but we could not put her in any rehab facility because they wouldn't accept her because they said it's too much of a liability. We cannot connect her to a peritoneal machine. So I ended up taking a lot of time off, taking care of her during this time. So I'm wondering where are those resources and who should I contact for that? Thank you.
That is a gap in our services, and peritoneal dialysis is one of the hardest things to find care for. I'm so sorry. It's one of those things that it's difficult. It's a challenge to find. I personally would try to help you, but I don't know of anywhere that you can go specifically for that type of care, because it's hard to find trained professionals. And like you mentioned, even the skilled nursing facilities at that level of care, it's hard to find care. And so I don't have an answer for you today, but I do know that that's a gap in our services. It's hard to find that. I'm so sorry.
So let's give Nicole a round of applause. So one of the reasons that we have set the format for today's breakfast event the way it is because we know there are a lot of gaps in services. So if you have an idea based on your own experience that you can share with someone else, please don't hesitate to give your pragmatic and unofficial advice, because there are gaps. There's no perfect scenario here. So with that, I want to just one request. We have had somebody who has lost their phone, and it wasn't me because mine's on the podium, but it looks just like this. It's a black iPhone. So if